They tried to steal my $10 million cabin, even though I bought it legally for just 25 cents. Sounds insane, right? But that's exactly what happened when the HOA showed up at my door, waving papers and claiming they owned everything I'd worked for. Here's how a broke plumber turned homeowner ended up in the fight of his life. 6 months before the HOA stormed into my life, I was just Marcus Kane, a 52-year-old plumber in Denver, with nothing but rusting tools, an empty fridge, and a divorce decree that felt like a death sentence. My ex-wife Jennifer had walked away with half my savings, half my equipment, and apparently half my will to live, leaving me with a battered pickup that smelled like pipe glue and desperation. I was tired of heating frozen dinners under buzzing fluorescent lights, tired of drowning in bills, and tired of being invisible. But my dad always said broken men can rebuild anything if they've got calloused hands and stubbornness. And that thought kept me showing up to tax auctions every month, chasing a miracle. Those courthouse sales were brutal. Squeaky benches, stale air, and shark-eyed investors circling, like vultures. But I kept scanning the listings, praying for something no one else noticed. Then one Tuesday morning my heart nearly stopped. Buried halfway down the auction sheet was an entry, Whispering Pines Cabin. 15 acres of lakefront property, minimum bid 25 cents. The photo looked like a crime scene, caved-in roof, busted windows, weeds taller than the porch. But the words Lakefront Colorado hit me like a lightning bolt. Liquid gold. My hand shot up before I even had time to second guess, and when the gavel smacked wood I was the proud owner of a decaying cabin in the mountains for less than the price of a gumball. Driving up Highway 285 that afternoon, my pickup rattling like it might fall apart, I rounded a bend and there it was, Lake Serenity, shimmering like glass, Rocky Mountain peaks glowing in the sun, and my crumbling cabin clinging to the shoreline like a secret waiting to be reborn. The moment I stepped onto that property, I knew I wasn't just looking at a broken down shack. I was standing on buried treasure disguised as rotten wood. The cabin was rough, sure. Shingles scattered like fallen leaves, windows spiderwebbed with cracks, and a front porch that creaked under my weight like it was begging for mercy. But the bones were good. Thick hand-hewn logs, a foundation straight as my father. His old level, and the kind of craftsmanship you just don't see anymore. I walked the shoreline, boots crunching against gravel, inhaling that sharp, pine-scented air that made city lungs feel brand new, and I swore the mountains themselves whispered, "This is yours." That's when the first shadow fell across my sunshine. Literally, a spotless white Escalade purred up the gravel driveway like a predator gliding in for the kill. Out stepped a woman who looked like she'd stepped straight out of a luxury catalog. Perfect silver hair lacquered into place, designer boots cleaner than my Sunday dishes, and a clipboard clutched like it was the 10 Commandments. "Excuse me," she said, with a voice trained to command bake sales and boardrooms alike. "I'm Delilah Thornfield, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association." I pulled out my tax deed, proud as a kid showing off his first report card. "Marcus Kane," I said, "new owner." Her smile could have frozen the sun. "Oh, sweetie, tax sales are cute, but they don't override our covenants." She flipped open her brick-thick HOA manual and started rattling off violations like she was reading my obituary. Demolition required, non-compliance this, illegal that. My jaw clenched as she told me, with that syrupy condescension only people like her can master, that folks like me usually just walk away. That was the moment I realized my dream cabin wasn't just a fixer-upper. It was ground zero for war. The war started small, the kind of skirmishes you laugh at until you realize the enemy's bleeding you dry. I'd barely started hauling debris out of the cabin when a beat-up county truck pulled in, and out waddled a 20-something in a reflective vest that looked 2 sizes too big. His name tag read Bryce Thornfield, yeah, Delilah's nephew, and he carried a citation pad like it was Excalibur. "You're parked incorrectly," he announced with the self-importance of a mall cop pointing at my truck sitting in my own damn driveway. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He slapped me with a $500 fine for being perpendicular to the property line. Tuesday, I got another for unauthorized construction noise because I ran a saw at 9 a.m. Wednesday, it was improper waste storage because I had debris containers near the porch. By Thursday, they fined me for not planting petunias around a foundation I was still rebuilding. Every pink slip fluttering in the breeze felt like a paper cut. And together, they started to bleed me. That was Delilah's game, death by 1,000 citations. She didn't need bulldozers, she had bureaucracy. But here's the thing about plumbers. We learn to think around problems. I wasn't about to roll over and let some clipboard tyrant choke me out. That Saturday, I drove into the county records office, a dingy basement that smelled like mildew and lost hope. Hours of digging through dusty files finally handed me a golden ticket. The HOA was only 8 years old. My cabin, built in 1962. Translation? My property was grandfathered under pre-existing use. Their shiny new rules didn't touch me. For the first time, I felt the tide turn. But if Delilah was a storm, I'd just poke the clouds, and storms don't take kindly to being challenged. The following week, I learned just how far Delilah was willing to go to crush me. I was knee-deep in sawdust, rewiring outlets with my dad's old toolkit, when gravel crunched outside, and a county inspector slapped a neon orange work stop order on my door like he was serving a death sentence. "All electrical work requires permits you never filed," he mumbled, not even looking me in the eye. My stomach dropped. I'd filed those permits 3 weeks ago. But according to his tablet, there was no record, and the fine was 10 grand per day until I stopped work. $10,000 per day. It was like being charged rent for breathing. I stormed down to the county office, only to watch the clerk find my permits buried in some miscellaneous folder. Weird mistake, right? Even weirder when I discovered on social media that the inspector played golf every Thursday with, you guessed it, Delilah Thornfield. That's when I knew I wasn't just fighting HOA nonsense. I was fighting a rigged system. I hired a scrappy paralegal named Zoe who saw through the game instantly. "These citations?" she said, waving my stack of fines, legally worthless toilet paper. We filed motions, but paperwork wasn't enough. I needed the world to see what was happening. That night, I set up a tripod and filmed my first Cabin Chronicles video. Just me, sweat-soaked and furious, ripping rotten boards off the porch while classic rock blasted in the background. To my shock, the video blew up. Thousands of strangers cheered me on, commenting things like, "Stick it to the HOA" and "Team Marcus." For the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. But as my support grew, Delilah's smile shrank. And when bullies feel the crowd slipping from their grip, they don't retreat, they double down. The more my videos went viral, the more desperate Delilah became. And desperation makes people dangerous. It started with whispers in the neighborhood. Flyers slipped under doors warning that I was a con man stealing property from hardworking families. Then came the online smear campaign, fake reviews torching my plumbing business, calling me a fraud, a thief, a criminal. Jobs I'd booked for weeks vanished overnight. Customers canceled in droves, spooked by headlines accusing me of scamming my way into paradise. One morning, I woke up to see my own face plastered across professional quality posters around town with bold red letters, "Cabin Criminal." And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, a sheriff knocked on my door, eyes heavy with regret, and handed me papers. I was officially under criminal investigation for property fraud. 20 years in prison hung over my head like a guillotine. My GoFundMe dried up, my comment sections turned toxic, and even my ex-wife called sobbing, asking if I'd lied to her all those years. For a moment, I felt like maybe Delilah had won. She'd poisoned the well so thoroughly the world was starting to believe her lies. But then Zoe called me with a voice trembling from excitement. She'd uncovered something buried in state records, something that made my heart pound harder than the sheriff's knock. "Marcus," she said, "you're not the criminal here. Delilah's entire HOA isn't even legally real." I froze. No legal foundation, no authority. Every fine, every citation, every threat, completely worthless. For the first time, the Queen's crown started to crack. But here's the thing about cornered animals. When you strip away their power, they don't surrender. They attack with teeth bared. And I was about to find out just how savage Delilah could be. The morning I walked onto my construction site and smelled diesel fuel, I Knew Delilah had crossed the line from petty tyrant to outright criminal. My generator was dead, its tank full of sugar. My work truck? Tires slashed clean through, hydraulic lines cut like a surgeon had practiced on them. Thousands of dollars of equipment crippled overnight with surgical precision. This wasn't random vandalism. It was sabotage. Miguel, a contractor friend who'd been volunteering weekends, shook his head grimly. This is professional. Someone knew exactly what to hit. That night, a note appeared under my windshield wiper, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Accidents happen on construction sites. Smart people know when to quit. The message was clear: stop or get buried. My hands trembled, not from fear but from rage. I installed motion sensor cameras around the cabin, and within a week, they caught pure gold. Bryce Thornfield, Delilah, soft-bellied nephew, skulking around at 2 a.m., wearing a reflective vest that practically glowed in infrared. He thought he was being slick, but the footage showed him clumsily slicing hoses like a toddler with scissors. I posted the video online, and my followers exploded. Shares, comments, outrage pouring in from across the country. For every attempt Delilah made to break me, the internet made me stronger. But public humiliation only seemed to fuel her fire. Suddenly, volunteers helping me restore the cabin started getting harassed. Pete, the hardware store owner giving me discounts, had his windows spray-painted with profanity. Miguel's truck was keyed in the grocery parking lot. Elderly neighbors supporting me got late-night phone calls, just heavy breathing and whispered threats. Delilah wasn't just trying to destroy me anymore, she was terrorizing an entire community. And when you push a community too far, sometimes they push back harder than you ever imagined. When the FBI shows up at your doorstep with a folder thicker than your tool belt, you know the game's changed. It all started with Jerry, a grizzled ex-cop I'd hired as a private investigator who lived on gas station coffee and bad habits, but had instincts sharper than a hunting knife. He'd been digging through Delilah's financials, HOA records, and county filings for weeks. And one night he spread everything across my kitchen table like a crime scene puzzle. "Marcus," he said, tapping foreclosure papers with a nicotine-stained finger, "Delilah's not rich, she's drowning. Her husband's construction company owes over $2 million. This whole campaign? It's not about community standards, it's about her survival." That's when FBI agent Rebecca Foster entered the picture, a sharp-eyed woman who radiated calm, authority, the kind of person who could dismantle a liar with a single raised eyebrow. She interviewed me for 3 hours straight, recording every detail of Delilah's harassment, every fraudulent fine, every sabotaged permit. "Patterns like this don't stop with one victim," she told me, voice steady as steel. "Your documentation probably prevented dozens of future scams." The weight of her words hit me. This wasn't just about saving my cabin. Anymore, it was about exposing a criminal machine disguised as an HOA. When Agent Foster left, she shook my hand firmly. "Keep your cameras rolling, Marcus. Every nail you hammer, every threat you get, it's all evidence now." That night, as I uploaded another time-lapse video of cabin progress, I felt the tide shift. For the first time, it wasn't just me versus Delilah. It was me, an online army of supporters, and the federal government closing in on her empire. But the thing about cornered tyrants, they'll burn the entire house down before they let it slip through their fingers. I thought I'd seen Delilah's worst, but nothing prepared me for the flashing red and blue lights that lit up my cabin at dawn like a crime scene from a TV show. DEA agents stormed my property in full tactical gear, shouting commands as if I were Pablo Escobar instead of a middle-aged plumber with a half-restored cabin. An anonymous tip claimed I was running a meth lab in my basement, using construction as cover. The absurdity was breathtaking. Hundreds of hours of footage online showed me hammering, sawing, wiring, restoring every inch of that place. Still, they turned the cabin upside down for 3 straight hours, pulling apart storage bins, sniffing through paint cans, even dismantling my coffee maker, which apparently doesn't qualify as drug equipment no matter how strong my brew is. In the end, they found nothing. Zero. Zilch. The lead agent muttered apologies, frustration etched on his face, and finally admitted the tip came from a burner phone. Guess whose address that number was tied back to? Delilah Thornfield. Another federal crime added to her growing list. But by then, the damage was already done. Neighbors filmed the raid, news stations aired headlines about a cabin meth bust, and trolls flooded my socials with calls for me to confess. My reputation, already shredded, was now radioactive. And yet, when I looked at Agent Foster's steely eyes as she studied the raid reports, I saw something shift. "Desperate people make desperate mistakes," she said, almost to herself. And Delilah just handed us the rope she's going to hang herself with. That night, as a storm brewed over the lake and lightning split the peaks in two, I realized Delilah's empire was collapsing fast. But a collapsing empire doesn't fall quietly, it explodes. And I was standing right in the blast zone. The cracks in Delilah's empire didn't just appear, they split wide open in front of the entire town. It started with Sarah Martinez, a local news reporter who'd been quietly following my cabin chronicles. She called one afternoon, voice humming with barely contained excitement. "Marcus," she said, "we're about to air a 3-part exposé and your story is the centerpiece." When the segment hit the airwaves, it was like lobbing dynamite into the HOA's glass house. Sarah laid everything bare: the fraudulent fines, the bogus citations, the conflict of interest between inspectors and Delilah, even the footage of Bryce skulking around my cabin like an incompetent saboteur. But the real bombshell came when she revealed financial records showing Delilah had been embezzling HOA funds to cover her husband's construction debts. The so-called queen of community standards wasn't protecting property values, she was looting her neighbors to save herself. Phones started ringing off the hook at the county office. Residents who'd once been too afraid to speak up flooded Sarah with their own horror stories. Families forced out by harassment, retirees bankrupted by bogus fees, homes mysteriously bought up by Thornfield Construction for pennies, only to be flipped for hundreds of thousands. The pattern was undeniable, and the anger spread like wildfire. Even Delilah's loyalists, the ones who used to nod along at her every word, couldn't ignore the evidence scrolling across their TV screens. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. But fear doesn't tame people like Delilah, it turns them feral. That same evening, as I stood on my dock watching the mountains glow orange in the sunset, headlights cut through the darkness. Delilah's Escalade rolled up slow, and when she stepped out clutching a manila envelope, her smile was gone. In its place was something far uglier: desperation. Delilah didn't knock. She barged into my cabin like a storm in designer. Heels, clutching a manila envelope thick enough to choke a shredder. "Mr. Kane," she spat, voice trembling with forced authority, "I'm serving you with official fraud allegations." She slammed the papers onto my table, her perfume failing to mask the sour stench of desperation. The complaint claimed I'd deceived the court, illegally obtained my deed, and concealed known HOA restrictions. In her twisted narrative, I wasn't a homeowner fighting to restore a cabin. I was a criminal mastermind facing 20 years behind bars. And she said it with such venom that for one terrifying moment, I almost believed her. "Fraud carries serious penalties," she sneered, lips curling into that predatory smile. "Prison, asset forfeiture, everything you've built, gone." My chest tightened, but I refused to flinch. I'd been bullied before. This time I had millions of eyes watching. Still, the fallout came fast. Within hours, news anchors repeated her allegations like gospel, hashtags, branded me a scammer, and my GoFundMe donations flatlined. The internet crowned me guilty before a judge even looked at the papers. But Delilah's fatal flaw wasn't ambition, it was arrogance. She assumed fear would silence me, but fear lit my fire instead. That night, I went live, holding her allegations up to the camera. "This," I told my growing online army, "is what corruption looks like. Lies, intimidation, and greed dressed up as justice." The chat exploded with support, thousands pledging to fight alongside me. But even as I spoke, I knew Delilah wasn't finished. The envelope wasn't her knockout punch, it was her opening swing in a final, all-out brawl. And judging by the fire in her eyes when she left, her next move would be darker, dirtier, and far more dangerous. The end didn't come quietly. It detonated in front of the whole community like a grenade tossed into a glass house. The Whispering Pines HOA meeting was supposed to be another one of Delilah's power plays, a stage where she could rally her loyalists and smear my name in front of the neighbors. Instead, it turned into the most spectacular public meltdown I've ever witnessed. The room was packed, residents shoulder to shoulder, local news crews crammed in the back, cameras rolling. Delilah strutted to the podium, face painted with fake confidence, and launched into a tirade. "This man," she shouted, pointing at me with shaking hands, "is destroying our community. He's a criminal, a con artist, a danger to everything we stand for." But when she demanded an emergency vote to strip my ownership, I stood and calmly plugged my laptop into the projector. The screen lit up with Zoe's meticulously built timeline, every bogus fine, every sabotage permit, every threat, stamped with dates, signatures, and hard evidence. Gasps filled the room as I advanced slide by slide. Bryce caught on camera vandalizing my equipment, county. Inspectors golfing with Delilah. Bank records showing her husband's company flipping stolen homes. Then came the kill shot, a legal document proving the HOA had never been properly registered with the state. For 8 years, Delilah had been running a phantom empire built on nothing but smoke and intimidation. The color drained from her face, but before she could scream fake evidence, the doors slammed open and FBI agents marched in, badges flashing under fluorescent lights. "Delilah Thornfield," Agent Foster declared, voice slicing through the chaos, "you are under arrest for fraud, extortion, and racketeering." The room erupted, half in cheers, half in stunned silence, as the queen of the HOA was led away in handcuffs. But even in shackles, her glare never left me. And I knew this war wasn't over until the final hammer dropped. The morning Delilah was marched out of the courthouse in handcuffs, flanked by federal marshals, and blinded by the flash of news cameras, felt like stepping into the final scene of a movie. The woman who once towered over me with smug smiles and phantom power now shuffled, in designer heels that clicked against concrete like broken promises. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was just another criminal stripped of her crown. The verdict came swift: 8 years in federal prison, $15 million in restitution. To the families she'd bled dry, and the complete dissolution of her fake HOA. Bryce, the clipboard clown who'd harassed me with citations, got probation and community service. Sentenced to spend weekends picking up trash along the very trails he once tried to sabotage. The irony tasted sweeter than victory itself. As for me, the 25-cent cabin transformed into something no one could have predicted: a park, a sanctuary, a living monument to stubbornness and justice. Families hiked trails through golden aspens, kids skipped stones across Lake Serenity, and my once-rotting cabin stood proud as an educational center, teaching others how to fight back against bullies with clipboards. Local businesses thrived, tourism boomed, and the community that once cowered under Delilah's shadow now stood shoulder to shoulder, free. On the dock at sunset, with the mountains painted in impossible colors and the air heavy with pine and fresh possibility, I realized something. I hadn't just won a legal battle. I'd won back my life, my dignity, and my place in the world. That cabin wasn't just worth $10 million, it was priceless because it proved one thing loud and clear. No matter how powerful the bully, if you stand your ground and fight smart, justice always finds a way. And that's how a 25-cent cabin turned into a $10 million. War against the most corrupt HOA in Colorado, and why justice finally won. But here's the part where I need you. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what's the craziest thing an HOA, landlord, or neighbor has ever tried to pull on you? I read every single one, and some of your stories might even inspire the next video. If watching Delilah's empire crumble made your day, smash that like button so this story reaches more people, and hit subscribe with the notification bell on, because next week I'm exposing how my neighbor tried to steal my driveway and ended up owing me his fence. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.